It's hard to believe we've come to week 50 of Core 52, our journey through the Bible every week of the year for this year. I hope that you've been journeying with us. If you haven't, you can jump in at any time. In fact, now would be a great time as we're getting ready to turn the calendar. Week 50, Mark Moore, the author of Core 52, jumps into Scripture, or the Bible. And I am so passionate about this topic. If there is anything you can do to grow in your spiritual journey with Jesus, there's one thing, and it's read the Bible. In fact, at the very beginning of this essay, Mark Moore says that research has shown that those who engage in the Bible 4 times a week or more have stronger marriages, healthier habits, and better self-esteem. There's nothing more important that you can do than get into the Bible each and every day, and I encourage you to do that. And Mark Moore gives us some suggestions on how to do that. I'm going to take some of his suggestions and add some of my own and talk to you for just a few minutes about that. First of all, let's remember that getting into the Bible doesn't just mean getting into the Bible. So it's not just reading through the Bible, whether you do it in a year or reading through a book of the Bible or whatever you do. The important thing is getting the Bible through you. The goal is not just for information, but for transformation. As we've gone along in Core 52, we've talked about increasing our Bible IQ, but that doesn't mean just increasing our knowledge about the Bible. It means increasing how the Bible applies to our lives. And so I want to talk to you just real briefly about that for the next couple of minutes. I'm going to do that using a method of Bible study. The method of Bible study is called SOAP, S-O-A-P. So it's an acronym for how to study the Bible. The S stands for Scripture. So it's getting into whatever it is you're going to read in the Bible. Now, a lot of people like to do this, especially this time of year, go through a read through the Bible in a year program, or other people like to do different programs. There's all kinds of Bible apps that you can use to get you into the Bible. Here at Aldersgate, when we preach each week, we encourage you to take the scriptures that we're preaching on and go deeper in them, and we give you extra scriptures to do that with. Sometimes we put reading guides out for you. The bottom line is, you got to find a piece of scripture to read or get into. And there's lots of different ways to help you do that. One of the other things that you need to consider is which translation of the Bible do I want to use, because there's lots of different translations out there. Just briefly, let me explain 3 of them to you. So the first one is literal. Literal means that when the words were translated from Hebrew in the Old Testament or Greek in the New Testament, they were literally translated word for word. This is the English Standard Version or the New American Standard Bible. I typically preach and teach out of the English Standard Version for that reason. There are also what we call idiomatic translations, and these translations don't translate word for word, but instead phrase for phrase. So this would be like the New Living Translation or the NIV translation. Some people even put the Message translation in there, even though others consider it to be what we call a paraphrase translation, which is just a paraphrase of the overall context of the piece of scripture that we're looking at. So the Message might be an example of that. There are lots of others of those out there. Whatever you choose to get into, just make sure you choose one that's best for you, so that you know the differences between those. And then you need to get into the scripture. I love the way Mark Moore says it here in this essay. He says, you need to read it. And when I first glanced over that, I was like, well, duh, you have to read it, but you have to read it. A lot of times we have a Bible sitting around our house, or we have the app on our phone, but we actually have to get into reading the scripture. So I would encourage you to do that first and foremost. The second thing is observation. And observation is just asking ourselves, what is the scripture that I'm reading saying? What does this say? I have to look at the whole context around what I'm reading. I have to look at the big picture, and I just ask myself, what is this saying? And there are lots of different study tools out there to help you with this. Some of you have study Bibles, and it has footnotes at the end that you can read. You can go to commentaries. You can Google information on the particular scripture that you're reading. But let me encourage you to do this. When you're studying the Bible, before you go to any resource or tool, can you just sit with it for a second and say, God, what is this saying? What does this mean? What is it saying to me? And just spend some time with that before you jump into any kind of Bible study tool. The A stands for application. And application is saying, what does it mean to me? Not just what is it saying, but what is it saying to me, and what does it mean to me, and how can I apply this to my life? I may read a passage of Scripture today, and I may read it 3 months from now, and Jesus never changes, but sometimes the way He speaks to me can change. And so the way this Scripture speaks to me today, it may speak differently to me 3 months from now. And so what is this passage of Scripture saying to me right now? Now, that has to stay authentic to what it's saying in general, but still, what is it speaking to me today, and how can I apply that to my life? And finally, the P stands for pray. So I take that Scripture that I'm reading, whether it's one verse, whether it's a whole chapter or a passage of Scripture, whatever it may be, and after I've read it and observed it and kind of got the meaning from it, and then what the meaning is for me and how I'm going to apply it to my life, I simply pray that passage of Scripture. I may even take and put my name in it. I may pray it over somebody else, but I pray and make that prayer very specific to me. So here's what I would challenge you to do. Whether you're going through Core 52 with us or not, start today. Find a passage of Scripture, read it, observe it. What does it mean? What does it mean to me? How can I apply it to my life? And then pray that passage of Scripture. You begin to do that today. You do that 3 or 4 times a week over the next few weeks, months, years. God will transform your life. Guaranteed.